final keynote of the day and the conference. We are going to welcome Joe Jalfon, Chief Operating Officer at the Aotearoa Circle, with 25 years of experience in senior leadership roles across tourism, technology, bioeconomy and media. And along with Joe, we are welcoming Raymond Chang as well. Freshwater and stormwater specialist with 19 years experience leading environmental science across New Zealand's largest infrastructure projects. Let us have a round of applause for Joe and Ray.
Thanks, Tarada, and good research there. I am stepping in for our Chief Executive, Vicky Watson, from the Aotearoa Circle, who unfortunately has caught the Wellington bug, as I am now calling it. But kia ora koutou, everybody. I'm Joe Jalfon. I'm the CEO at the Aotearoa Circle, as Tarada kindly said. Thank you very much for being here this morning, and thank you to Gillian as well for the opportunity to speak today and connect our work with your own. But before I begin, a quick introduction on who we are. If you can all cast your minds back to 2019, a dark, stormy time, it was the year that the All Blacks unfortunately lost the Rugby World Cup semi-final to England. I think the only person cheering at the time was my husband. It was also a time that this building unfortunately caught fire during construction. You could say it was a tumultuous year for New Zealand, but suffice to say, from the fires of time, the Aotearoa Circle was born. Oh, gone back, sorry. It wasn't so much a biblical time, so to speak, as critical. So our co-founder, Sir Rob Fenwick, a visionary business leader and environmentalist, he recognised at the time that something fundamental, our natural resources, fuel our economy, and its continuing degrading posed a real risk to all of us. He firmly believed that restoring our natural capital is essential to a healthy economy, and that the pathway forward lay in government and business working together. That vision continues to define our work today, with leaders across the public and the private sectors coming together. Our partnership is truly unique. There's no other direct equivalent internationally. In many ways, it reflects the Aotearoa, the best of Aotearoa, our Kiwi can-do attitude, which is obviously grounded in our number eight wire ingenuity. And our guardians, including Izzy Fenwick, says that our 2 degrees of separation across New Zealand enables that collaboration across sectors, strong connections, and collective action at speed. And speed is really important. We're working to a mission to enable the restoration of our natural capital for future generations by 2035. Otherwise, we'll have reached a tipping point. We're apolitical. We're using our convening capability to address complex, challenging issues facing our key sectors, from agriculture, energy, transport, seafood, finance, and tourism. And these solutions are being developed collaboratively. We're delivering them through practical cross-sector reports, scenarios, legal opinions that seek to reduce risk, strengthen resilience, and ultimately restore our natural capital. So some of these companies on the slide here you'll recognise. So today we've got more than 60 partners across the public and private sectors. Many you'll recognise, including Boffa School and Beca. Our partners are our lifeblood. We're incredibly proud to work alongside them. We draw on their expertise, their insight, and their shared commitment to building a more resilient environment for New Zealand and for our economy. Forward one. Yeah. Our board is made up of guardians, as we call them, and that they reflect the same public-private partnership commitment. We've got senior leaders and CEOs who've got deep sector experience. We're grateful for their time and their commitment. They're each respected leaders who deeply understand our reliance on natural capital resources and actively promote our work within their own spheres of influence. Like our partners, we're hugely grateful for their support. Also, it's really important that we have a youth perspective. We've got a rangatahi advisory panel ensuring that future generations have a voice at the decision-making table. We're comprised of emerging leaders from across our partner organisations. Our RAP, as we call them, represents those who will not just inherit our decisions, but also the consequences. Their voice now is critical in this conversation. So I hope that gives you a clear sense of who the Circle is. We're public-private, but we are action-orientated. The completion of our work, our roadmap or a scenario or a legal opinion, etc., is just the starting line. So that brings me to our recently released Natural Infrastructure Plan. This plan started with a simple truth that every day our natural systems are guarding, protecting, providing and performing economic functions. They reduce the flood risk, they filter water, they stabilise land and they regulate temperature. With infrastructure in New Zealand at a critical intersection, as we know, we need to ensure that we're considering all the options, and particularly those that can provide multiple benefits to our economy. We understand the value of traditional infrastructure. Our roads move goods, our pipes deliver water, bridges connect communities. So when the Infrastructure Commission began developing their 30-year natural infrastructure plan, our question was quite simple. How do we get nature at the table? After all, nature is quietly, often invisibly, delivering infrastructure services. So why are we not recognising that nature is infrastructure? To answer that, we worked with more than 200 collaborators over the course of a year. This is just a snapshot of some of the entities that participated and contributed to our work. The result was the launch of the Natural Infrastructure Plan at Parliament in March. We had a hugely positive response from our partners at the time and other stakeholders, including ministers and opposition. Our plan reflects an ambition that goes well beyond business as usual. It recognises that simply mitigating the environmental impacts of our activities is no longer enough. We've got to urgently halt and reverse nature loss if we're to build long-term economic value, strengthen our resilience and remain an innovative and competitive country well into the future. So at its core, the plan positions natural infrastructure as the foundation of our economic system. It's not an optional add-on, because if we can get this right, we can do more than restore and protect our natural capital. We can create the conditions for our country to flourish. And in doing so, we enable the same outcome for our economy, one that is more resilient, more productive, and better equipped for the challenges that lie ahead. At our launch, those in the room, and I trust like you, understand the opportunity we have. They also understood that engineered solutions, the infrastructure needs, the challenges that we face may often appear cheap upfront, but often cost more over time. So that can be in the case of, repairs and lost cost benefits. The Infrastructure Commission also recognises that we need a long-term, practical and affordable pathway. This slide is from their plan to deliver the infrastructure that New Zealand needs to thrive over the next 30 years. So the National Infrastructure Plan was in part a seed for the Natural Infrastructure Plan. It gets a bit complicated when you're using such similar terminology. But the National Infrastructure Plan identifies 10 priorities that New Zealand needs to focus on over the next decade. These range from lifting hospital investment for our ageing population to completing our catch-up on water infrastructure renewals across the country, to implementing time of use charging and road user charges to get the most of our urban road networks. But we believe, yes, there is another solution, and that opportunity lies in natural infrastructure and the benefits it offers. While discussions with government are continuing on the National Infrastructure Plan, we've also been progressing discussions with Infracom and the government, among others, on the Natural Infrastructure Plan's recommendations. In the short term, we see the recommendations for both the public and the private sector. For the public sector, the recommendations are starting with the fact that we need to get natural infrastructure defined in the definition of infrastructure, specifically Section 3 of the Planning Bill, with a cross-reference to the Natural Environmental Bill, which is currently before government, and those conversations are underway. The second is recognising our economic dependency on natural infrastructure as a national risk. Our recommendation is including it within the National Risk and Resilience Framework managed by the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, the DPMC. The third recommendation is bolstering central and local government understanding of natural infrastructure, including its ecosystems and resiliency benefits, to ensure it's better considered and ultimately included as options in infrastructure solutions. It's a recommendation that we trust will make your roles easier when dealing with government and in the wider infrastructure discussions. And while your sector may understand nature-based solutions better than others, we've also asked that the private sector plays a part in the plan. So key to continuing discussions is bolstering that capability in the adoption and consideration of natural infrastructure and championing the multiple benefits that it offers. This doesn't mean that responsibility sits solely with you. It requires a collective but a cross-sector response. A traditional backup when things go wrong, we all turn to insurance, but the insurance sector can play a really important role in progressing this conversation, in fact a leading role, by clearly connecting resilience and risk reduction through natural infrastructure. The result is lower risk, continued insurability and greater certainty for our economy. One of our partners is QB Insurance, and they understand this deeply. From recovery alone they believe that recovery alone isn't sufficient. Instead, the risk only increases. As they say, we can't keep repairing the same damage in the same places repeatedly, especially when a better response is already proven. We know that when the natural infrastructure is working, we see it through our wetlands, our rivers, our forests, our dunes, our floodplains. They're already providing us with flood mitigation, water filtration, erosion control, carbon storage and temporary regulation daily, all without sending us any invoices, contracts or maintenance schedules. For that reason, nature is arguably the most valuable infrastructure asset that we have. Because we undervalue it, we also underinvest of it. And that's why our immediate recommendation and last recommendation for the private sector focuses on investing and funding. With a predicted $1 trillion needed for infrastructure over the next 30 years, coupled with climate exposure, we need to continue developing innovative funding models and finance mechanisms that can better fund natural infrastructure at scale. Suffice to say, our plan is comprehensive. In fact, it delves into all these areas and it's made up of 6 key sections. The first section focuses on the business case, the why, the how. The nature-based solutions present a key opportunity for resilience. The next section is a policy map, which we worked on with Chapman Tripp, modelling how implementing natural infrastructure complements existing policies and legislation, as well as international FTA and agreements. Next, we've got an investment decision toolkit, which is derived from significant consultation and expertise to help determine how investment can be made to gain financial, environmental, cultural and social returns. We also have 6 case studies in the plan, which were undertaken by Beca, providing deep dives into examples that prove the multifaceted benefits that natural infrastructure can deliver. And the fifth element of the plan is the economic sector growth opportunities that natural infrastructure presents for our towns and cities, for our tourism sector, for agriculture and the blue economy. And those are quite deep plans and recommendations for each of those sectors. And lastly, the third part and the final part, is to how do we innovate at scale? And that's just the final recommendations that we've just detailed for the public and the private sector. Our goal in developing the plan was for nature to be fully recognised as infrastructure and prioritised. So 2 months on from our release of the plan at Parliament, our focus has shifted to application. We don't want this plan just sitting on desktops or lecterns. It is intended for practical application and execution. So it encourages decision makers like you to evaluate natural infrastructure alongside traditional engineered solutions, but also provides the tools to do that. And I'll speak to that a little bit now. So in developing the plan, we recognised, we're not seeking solutions for infrastructure that can do just one thing. Infrastructure can provide multiple benefits. So therefore, when we assess investment, let's also ask what else can be achieved. This investment decision toolkit has been designed to support this process consideration when making infrastructure investment decisions. It's based on current government infrastructure investment management systems, but it's designed to enable the evaluation of the use of nature-based solutions in infrastructure projects. The intent is improved decision-making. These practical tools can be used to evaluate the multiple benefits that nature-based solutions offer. But importantly, it's also designed to enable users to make comparative evaluations of investments options over immediate, short-term, medium and long-term horizons. The toolkit is supported by a set of investment principles to support credible, fair, consistent and effective multiple evaluation. This is included in a checklist against, so we've got a checklist against each investment principle and suggested performance indicators for each. Effectively, the tools within the plan give nature-based solutions a level playing field when evaluating investment options, but conversely, negative externalities can also be factored into the decision-making process. This is important because, when long-term horizons are being considered, with this, the life of the asset, including design, the construction, the operation, the maintenance, the decommissioning costs. This enables all these to be evaluated. So at the core, the plan is encouraging a simple but critical shift from defaulting to single solution thinking to considering all the options, the green, the grey and the blended at the point of design. Because when we're making decisions that are going to shape our infrastructure for decades, the greatest risk is not choosing the wrong option. It's failing to consider all the available options that we have. The shift we need is clear, from infrastructure first thinking to options first thinking, where natural infrastructure is not an afterthought, but a standard part of decision making. So if the case is so strong, what's stopping us from doing this already? We think partly it's habit. I'm sure you've seen this firsthand. Clients seek the lowest upfront costs or familiar design solutions. This is again where the plan's tools can play an important part. They're a practical forum from which you can have fuller conversations with clients or colleagues, and enables you to compare the grey and the green options, and sometimes with the most appropriate solution, both of those. It also enables you to assess long-term value and ultimately make better informed decisions and recommendations for your organisations, projects and clients. So I've talked a lot about natural infrastructure, but I want to emphasise that the Circle is not advocating for the replacement of traditional infrastructure. Instead, we're talking about strengthening it. Natural infrastructure, we believe, is another tool in the infrastructure toolkit. And when we can get that right, the benefits really stack up. We'll see stronger resilience, lower long-term costs, healthier ecosystems, more productive economies, and a thriving country. Natural infrastructure is not a trade-off, it's a win-win. So we've covered the what, the why, and some of the tools. But this only matters when it shows up in day-to-day decision-making and how options are scoped, assessed, and selected. I'm pleased now to introduce Raymond Chang from Beca to bring a peer-to-peer perspective, including examples of natural infrastructure and the decision-making toolkit in action. I'd like to hand over to you, Raymond.
Thank you, Jo, and unfortunately you'll be seeing my face for about a minute there, and I'll be slightly cringing internally. When Aotearoa Circle asked me to support this kōrero today, I took a little bit of time to think about the message in front of what I'd probably call as a broad church of highly supportive and informed individuals and practitioners. I'm not here to really preach to the converted and the willing. We've heard lots of examples of projects and project teams that acknowledge that nature has intrinsic value across this conference and many historical ones. And I've also sat in a couple of sessions this conference actually that we're already looking to explore different mechanisms and methods to value and justify applying funds to nature-based solutions or natural infrastructure. Claire, I want to talk to you later today about how we fund some of those nature solutions in the wider catchment too. But the circles work that Joe's showcased here is another way to do this, and I'll go into a few details about why we were involved and why I think it's a very good framework. The piece that I also want to talk about today is that a little bit of a gap in practice that I've seen some of the conversations and clients that I've been working with is that we may need some help to justify some of the investment at an internal governance level or in terms of justifying the budget allocation, the procurement approach, and some of the design review, and sometimes with a regulator too, with some of the more innovative nature-based solutions and make it more defensible. So I want to take a bit of a practical lens on the investment decision toolkit as a bit of a decision spine and work it through a worked example. And then on Monday, when our sore heads recover, we'll be able to give the many thousands of words in this document a little bit more of a read. So I want to focus on a concept which we're all familiar with. It's a kind of international term, MRV, measure, monitor, report, verify. So that's the kind of closing the loop part of the project. So I want to talk about one of the case studies that the Aotearoa Circle investigated. You may be familiar with this one because one of my colleagues presented a paper on this last year and the design approach. So I don't want to get into the detail of that. You can read that paper, which you should. He was nominated for a Young Professional of the Year award last night. Did not quite make it across the line, but still a great person. But the biofilter at the airport, in a high-level summary, it's the first of its kind in New Zealand. And when you're doing anything that's the first of its kind in New Zealand, you have to work through a range of justifications for that. In principle, currently it's treating about 50 hectares of the Auckland airport catchment, and it has a design capacity that can be expanded to about 150 odd. So it's quite a large contributing catchment for a device of its size. And I guess the really big benefit for the airport is that it's taking about a third of the land requirement that a normal GDO1 TP10 device might be taking. So when you're the airport and the land is at a premium, it's a really big benefit that was one of the reasons why this gained a level of support that saw some of the additional value that was available there. So it's an example of the familiar type of challenges really for an asset owner. So there's some real constraints, there's real performance expectations, there's a need to demonstrate that the solution will perform over time, and there's also a need to convince some regulators that it will work, and I'm looking at you, Auckland Council regulatory team, if you're in the room, some interesting conversations to really justify and build a business case to say that the validation was going to prove the design principle. So I think we can get a lot of credibility for nature-based solutions when we start subjecting them to the same tests and checks as the other assets that we might. So we want to treat them on the same playing field. That is one of the messages of the plan itself. I can't see the time. How far am I going? Okay, thank you. The Circle, as Joe mentioned, has developed an investment decision toolkit, and it's helpful because it fits into how infrastructure decisions are already getting made. So it's using the same language as the Treasury investment life cycle. So if you're already working in a better business case process or using a similar council investment framework, we're not really asking you to learn a new language. It's very familiar, and it's just looking to include the value of a natural or nature-based solution or natural infrastructure as part of that in a little bit more structured framework. So there's 4 steps in the framework itself. You can see them on screen here. Intentions is really about defining the need, identifying the nature-based solution that could be a credible option, and that it's not nice to have. That's a genuine alternative that could get evaluated amongst other traditional approaches. So in a stormwater context, I'm not an engineer, but adding it to our TP10 or waterways and wetland drainage guidance options is what we're really asking for there. The planning step is where you do the evaluation. That's a bit of a like-for-like multi-factor analysis across multiple time horizons, and there's a couple of investment principles that you can look at and be inspired by in the plan. And it talks about things that we're all familiar with: value for money, strategic alignment, desirability, and some of the cultural and environmental co-benefits. There's a structured, comparable way to do that. Delivery is about governance, accountability. Getting it built is the same as any other infrastructure project once you've decided on your option and how you might run it. And there's the realization piece here, which I alluded to earlier, and what I want to most talk about today. And in some projects, I think this is probably where it gets the most overlooked or undercooked. It's one of the things that I think really helps create greater decision confidence in the project, and I think is one of those areas that the industry can help deliver and share stories and data on to bring some of our solutions up to a more level playing field. So I think that's why it matters for this room. I think that we know that sometimes internal pathways don't necessarily reject nature-based solutions because they're green. They kind of want to know and appreciate that there's benefits, but they reject them because they're a bit harder to compare, they're harder to assure, and they're harder to defend when someone asks, how do you know it's going to work, and what will we do if it doesn't? The answers aren't as readily present as for some of the other infrastructure solutions. And so the validation component, the MRV, isn't necessarily a nice extra. That's my argument to you today. And it turns some of that uncertainty around as we start to understand that data and get that feeding back. So we're hopeful that we can normalize some of that MRV, the monitoring component that's common to all asset classes. I've gone on a bit long, so I'm going to carry on. I just want to tell you a little bit of a story about my involvement with this. So as part of the design development process for this work, I was asked to get involved early on in the process to review the design from a monitoring and outcomes perspective, working to confirm sort of what kind of locations were available, what the design principles were, treatment efficiency, etc. What were the outcomes that were being sought for in terms of the catchment management and also the receiving environment, and how that might be informed by an MRV process and monitoring plan. There may be luckier environmental scientists out there who've had this experience through multiple design projects, but I'd have to say that this is one of the few that I've actually managed to ask for some specific design elements to allow me to put the right instruments in the right place at the right time, and I even had them drawn up in CAD, and I felt like they were going to be built. Now, these did get value engineered out of the final design, but I guess I was at least part of the final consultation process about how we would still get the same outcome without some of those features. So not the luckiest, but definitely, I guess, part of the team where I did at least get consulted on a process on how we could still implement MRV in this context. And we're out there, I guess, right now thinking about implementing the instrumentation and commissioning of the monitoring plan itself. So the monitoring plan and its approach uses a bit of an event mean concentration lens. We're thinking about first flush, and we're looking at making sure that the results are comparable across storm events and relies on a really clear evidence chain, which will be fed back through to decision making and governance so that we can confirm what was built and that it's meeting the outcome. Got a minute. I'm going to skip the rest of that. Had an interesting reflection that Infracom was telling us as practitioners things that we should do. And I was going to end my message on a couple of key takeaways, and I guess I've thought about this in terms of whereabouts in the industry you might be. And I won't be quite so bold as to say this is what you should do on Monday morning, but something I'd certainly like us all to be thinking about on Monday morning. I think if you're an asset owner or a project proponent, I think it's really, it'd be really helpful, especially for an environmental scientist like myself, to bring an expectation of MRV as a baseline requirement in your projects. I think it will add value, and it's going to add value to our industry as a whole. It isn't a huge burden in terms of the context of capital value or cost, or operational costs, but the essentials like having a baseline, setting a small set of KPIs that might be tied to the decision question, and having an owner for all that reporting and the triggers that might need intervention. I think that would all be really useful to collate and report back on to forums like this, so that we start increasing the knowledge base on some of those outcomes for more innovative solutions. If you're a consultant or designer, keep the MRV as part of the asset. Don't bolt it on at the end. Use consistent locations and use the same principles. I didn't get to the award-winning paper last night's talk, but I will definitely be very interested in hearing some of those replicable and simple storm monitoring approaches and checking that out a little bit more myself. And I guess to everyone else in the room, I think if we want these solutions to scale, we have a room full of advocates, and we need a bit more decision confidence. That's my thesis to you. So with the monitoring, reporting framework done properly and commissioned properly, we'll often have a lever that turns that support into approval. And my shout out to everyone in this room is to share the results at the next conference. Thank you. Joe has something else to carry on, but I think we're going to be cut off.
We don't.
Yeah.
Unless it's like 2 words or less.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there then, Joey.
Only just, I hope you've all enjoyed the conference. Obviously, it's been fantastic. I hope you had the opportunity to learn and connect, but also think about your legacy. You're in the building, a very important building sector, and think about what your long-term legacy may be, and download our tools and contact us if you want some more information.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Tarita.
Is there a QR code after this slide? There we go. Is that it there? Brilliant. I don't know how QR codes work. I'm going to ask ChatGPT when I get back. What an excellent presentation. A round of applause for Joe and Ray. It's one of those moments where I went, I don't know. Don't understand the tech behind it. Couple of speakers left just to wrap us up. He is the incoming Stormwater SIG chair. Let us have a round of applause for Darren Tiddy.
Just briefly from me, thank you all so much for being here. It's been a fantastic conference. The energy, the conversation throughout has been truly inspiring. The work happening across the stormwater sector is making a big difference. Events like this remind us, just what we can achieve when we come together, shared knowledge. The committee is made up of people in this room, people that are here to listen. We exist to represent your diverse views and your needs, across the industry. So please keep talking to us, keep challenging us. If you've got something that you think needs to be addressed, raise it, but also come along for the journey. For those heading out on field trips, please take care and enjoy the experience. Make the most of seeing some of the great work in action. And for everyone heading home, whether it's across town or across the Tasman, travel safely, and we hope to see you again next year. Nō reira, tūtura whakamai, kia tina tina, hui e taukia. Let what has been said here be firmly established and made permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. I really want to echo what Darren has said, but perhaps I can just say a couple of things, reflecting on what Lewis has talked about this morning, but also what Jeff and Joe and Ray have talked about. When I think about when I joined Water New Zealand in 2020, I was reminded, whether I was talking to drinking water, wastewater or stormwater professionals, that we needed to raise the awareness, that we needed to get it really understood across across the economy, across the political sector, across the community sector, that we needed to invest and we needed to think about our water services that we are delivering. I think it would be fair to say the understanding of that challenge has risen. People are aware, and so if you think about what Lewis said, that's what he was talking about. The next challenge is to get it across the line in terms of all the investment that we need. When I think about it in the stormwater context, you and I are going to pay for the services. We're obviously going to pay for drinking water and wastewater too. So that whole pricing piece is going to be really, really important, whether it's about the reticulated assets part or whether it's about the wider environmental pieces in the catchment, which is then when it comes to, in my perspective, what Joe and Ray talked about in terms of the nature-based solutions and how do we make sure that they are included and all the way through to the investment in those business cases and delivered on the ground. I mean, I'm an environmental economist when I remember. You know, that was my background. I totally believe we have to be able to value things that don't have tangible value in our business cases. So as a community, that's a challenge that I think we've got to really address. If I could bottle your passion, you know, that's when I come to these events, that's what hits me. Whether it's conversations in the expo hall or conversations in the plenary sessions or in the coffee breaks or in the technical sessions, it's amazing. People who come into the water sector and experience it are stunned with what's here. We need to come together and we need to bottle it, seize the challenge that we got from Craig earlier on, whichever day of the week it was when Craig spoke. You know, that's something that's really important. So thank you. If Troy's in the building, he's here. Troy is going to give us our final karakia. For those of you who are worried about protocol, this was completely cleared with Ngāti Whātua Rake. So thank you very much. Great to see you here. Looking forward to seeing you at other events during the course of the year.
Kia ora, everybody. I got to use my notes because I often say things in reo and then forget to translate. So today I'm going to do a bit of a karakia in the reo and then I'm going to directly translate so you understand what I'm saying. And then it's not like, please give me your bank accounts details for etc. Ko rangi nui e tū iho nei, ko papa tōnuku e takoto nei, ka hiki iho ngā roi mata e a rangi ki te nuku o te whenua. Ka kō manawa ngā puna roi mata e a papa, ka hiki iho ake tana pūkohu ki te rangi. Ka rere mai ngā roi mata, rere kiuta a rere ki tai. Hei whāngai te rangi, hei whāngai te whenua, hei whāngai te tangata, ko tēnei te hurihanga o te wai. Rangi nui is above, papa tōnuku is below. The tears and the rains of Ranginui fall to the embrace of the land. The springs of papa flow out of the land, her mist rises to the sky. The tears flow to the hinterland, to the coast. To sustain the sky, to sustain the land, to sustain the people. This is the cycle of water. Ko mutu ke o tātou mahi ki tēnei hui hui roa. Ko taku hea e pai ana koutou mo tō haeriki ki tō tātou kāinga. Ko tēnei te karakia whakawātia mo te huarahi I mua I a tātou I tēnei wā. We've finished all our mahi here today. My hope is that you all have a safe journey home. And this is, I guess, the final karakia to clear the pathway for all of us home. Kia whakauria te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūriki whakataha ai, kia tūriki whakataha ai. Restrictions are moved aside so the pathways are clear to return to our everyday activities. Home e hui e, a tāki e.
Thank you, Troy. Hey, look, final note. For many of you, your pathway is going to be downstairs to morning tea. We have morning tea downstairs. For others of you, 10:45, which is pretty close, you're going on the site visits. So that is down on level 1. There'll be people pointing up the way. You've got quite an excellent cut lunch to take with you. So on behalf of everyone, what about a round of applause for everyone who is associated with the Stormwater Conference 2026? Enjoy the rest of your lives.